All right, everybody, welcome back for another deep dive with yours truly.
Yeah.
Today we're going deep on something I think we can all relate to a little bit. Failure.
Ooh, sounds a little ominous. I like it.
Well, I wouldn't say ominous exactly, but it definitely is an interesting one. See, we found this top 10 worst sports teams list for 2024. So naturally, we just have to break it down. Why were these teams so bad?
I am so ready for this. You know I love a good sports debate, but beyond just the straight up wins and losses, I think it'll be really revealing to see what this list tells us about like the state of different sports right now.
Totally. Now, I do have to point something out right off the bat. When I saw this list, my jaw kind of dropped because
Yeah.
7 out of the 10 teams were either baseball or football.
Oh wow, really? Yeah, that is interesting. What do you think that means? Like were those sports just cursed in 2024?
Right. Like, were they competing to see who could have the most disastrous season? That's what it feels like. So what do you think? Is there something about those sports that makes them more prone to, like, these epic meltdowns?
Well, first off, both baseball and football have insanely long seasons, right? So one bad trade, one bad injury, that can affect the whole team for like forever. It's a domino effect.
Oh, totally.
And I feel like team chemistry is super important in both of those sports. And maybe that's just harder to keep up over like 100+ games.
Okay, I can see that. Now, speaking of epic meltdowns, can we talk about the Chicago White Sox for a minute?
Oh boy, where do we even
I
begin?
know, right? They lost 121 games, a new MLB record. It's hard to even imagine that level of losing.
Yeah, like how does that even happen? Was it just bad trades
Mm-hmm.
or injuries? Or was there just like zero talent on the team?
That's what I want to know.
Okay, so to understand a collapse of this magnitude, you can't just point to one thing. It's never that simple. Yes, there were some head-scratching trades, and yeah, injuries definitely didn't help. But it really seems like they just completely failed to develop young talent. And they couldn't adapt to how the league was changing around them.
Yeah. And their winning percentage was, wait for it, .240, meaning they won roughly 1 out of every 4 games. Brutal!
I mean, the White Sox were in the playoffs a few years ago, right? It's wild.
I know. Talk about a fall from grace. It's incredible.
Absolutely incredible. In a bad way.
So, looking beyond the White Sox, it seems like there was another recurring theme on this list, especially in football, and that is terrible defense.
Oh, for sure. The Giants, the Titans, the Jaguars
Mhm.
all had major issues on defense.
I mean, missed tackles, giving up tons of yards, allowing way too many points.
Oh.
It's painful just to read about it, like what was going on.
That's a really good question. I wonder, were there any major changes in the NFL in 2024? Maybe some rule changes that favored the offense or new coaching styles, or even just a wave of these incredibly talented offensive players that defenses couldn't handle?
It's like you're describing some kind of defensive apocalypse. But it wasn't all about defense. Right. We also had teams like the Patriots and the Marlins who couldn't score runs if their lives depended on it.
Oh, absolutely. Two very different problems, but with the same end result.
So in your opinion, which is worse, a totally leaky defense or an offense that can't get anything going?
Ooh, that is a toughie. You know, a good defense can definitely keep you in games, even if you're not scoring a ton of points yourself.
Right.
But, like you said, you literally cannot win if you can't score. So I honestly think it just depends on the specific team and the league they're in, too.
Okay, that makes sense. So besides the teams that, like, totally imploded, there are a couple of other interesting categories on this list. Newcomers and contenders.
Oh, yeah, I love these
Me
categories.
too. So the newcomers, right? Those are teams like the Toronto Raptors and the LA Lakers, who you don't usually see them on a worst teams list.
It is surprising, especially because historically these are teams that have found a lot of success.
Exactly. So it's a huge shift for them.
It really makes you wonder about their future. Will they turn it around or are they, going downhill?
Big questions.
Yeah.
And then we have the contenders, which includes teams like the Jacksonville Jaguars and Manchester United,
Yikes. They are really flirting with disaster.
like on the edge of the cliff.
Exactly. The question is, will they keep falling? Or can they pull themselves back from the brink? We'll just have to wait and see.
So much drama. All right, before we wrap things up, I want to ask you, what are like the biggest takeaways here? We've got record-breaking losses, defensive nightmares, offenses that went totally silent, and teams both rising and falling. It's a lot to process.
You're telling me. Well, I think the big takeaway, the overarching theme here, is that no team, no matter how good they are, is immune to failure.
There's the truth.
And things can change so fast in sports. It can be a bad coaching decision, a bad trade, just bad luck, or even the entire league shifting around you. It's a constant reminder that building a winning team is a crazy, complicated puzzle.
It really is. Which, for fans, I think is what makes it so exciting and also maybe a little terrifying.
Definitely a little bit of both.
But the good news is, even the worst teams have the potential to make a comeback, right? There's always hope.
Absolutely. And that brings us to a final thought-provoking question for you all listening out there. If you were the general manager of one of these struggling teams, what would be your first move to turn things around?
Hmm, tough one. Would you target the draft, try to swing a big trade,
Hmm.
or would you just fire the entire coaching staff and start fresh? It's a lot to consider.
So much to think about.
All right, everybody, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of sports failures. Even though it can be tough to watch sometimes, remember, there's always next season. Until then, keep those debates going, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.
See you.